Okay, in Butara, Rwanda, a few years ago, there was a hospital. And this hospital was cramped, and it was dirty, and most importantly, it was ugly. That's a joke. But at least it was, in fact, ugly. There are some factors here that were literally decreasing patient health, which is not something that a hospital should do, because it was not clean, because nothing was well taken care of, and because it did not invite patients in. Nobody would come, and the people who did come got sick. So this guy, Michael Murphy, saw it, and he was like, okay, we can do better than this. And they did. They tore it down, and they built a new one, with the intention of creating a hospital that would heal the patient as a piece of architecture. Physically, how can we incorporate elements of this building that will add to patient health, not just literally, not just as far as sanitation, but let's create a space that is welcoming and inviting and represents a place of healing as opposed to a place of sickness. And there are some very practical things they did to do this. You can see there's an open-air walkway here. These are actually the halls of the hospital. These are the patient rooms. Everybody has an open window. Studies show that an open window increases general mood and outlook on life. So they're very intentional about that. You can also see the color yellow is used here in the background. Here's another example of those open-air walkways. So ultimately, all these aesthetic adjustments, they raise a question, which is, how do aesthetics affect our perceptions of the world? If these open-air walkways and these windows and the color yellow can improve patient health, then what else are aesthetics doing to us? And so to go through that, we're going to look at a few examples of artwork and products and the way they're perceived, and we're going to see how that goes. So the first thing that aesthetics can do is they can affect our mood. This is often through color. So the first example of this, we have Van Gogh's Starry Night, excuse me. Does anybody feel anything in particular when they look at this? It's kind of deep, calm, I guess. Yeah, no, for sure. So here we have an example of a deep blue that expresses a deep night. You might even think of a particular night when you look at this. The idea is simply that here we have the color blue, which feels a certain way. And you can see that very clearly in artwork, especially Van Gogh's. These are two of Andy Warhol's Marilyns. This, I think, raises something very interesting, which is that the color adjustment actually changes Marilyn's character here, if you'll bear with me. Marilyn on the right, perhaps, might be a little more in control, a little more calm because of that softer green, and Marilyn on the left is perhaps more excited or more interested. You can even see, I don't know if you can see on this projector, but there's actually a subtle change in the shade of yellow on her hair. Yeah, you can't tell at all. But these effects ultimately lead to adjustment in mood. There's one more. This is a coffee shop in Grapevine, Buongiorno Coffee. It's beautiful and wonderful. They do some things just like Michael Murphy did in the Butara Hospital, where they incorporate open windows, warm lighting, warm colors. They create a space that's ultimately very comforting, very nice to be in. Some of you would probably rather do your homework there than here. And so those are three examples of how aesthetics can affect our mood, general outlook. There's a third effect I'm going to talk about now, and this has a lot more to do with shape than color. It's actually the character of an object. So to look at that, oh, here, I got to draw something. Okay. This guy, Rudolf Arnheim, was writing about visuals and how they relate to our mind and our thinking. And he drew a piece that looked kind of like this, and he called it 2 Stories of Married Life. The idea, it's a little bit abstract, bear with me. The idea is that one of these stories is calm and controlled and very serious, and the other one is sort of not going so well. This is an example of how a shape, especially abstract shapes like these, can affect character. And so I think this is important, especially when you imagine that there are tons and tons of shapes in something like a hospital, and ultimately that compounded effect can be powerful. There's another example. These two shapes have names. I'm not going to tell you which one is which. One of them is Kiki, and the other is Boba. Can anybody guess, based on those names alone, which shape is Kiki and which shape is Boba?
It's Kiki on the left, Boba on the
You said Boba on the right?
Kiki on the
I said
left.
Kiki on the right.
Kiki on the right.
How many people think Kiki on the right and Boba on the left? You'd be correct. And it's kind of weird that that is as true and absolute as it appears to be, except for Brianna. We have an outlier, which is good. Go you. Some might argue that maybe the shape of the letter, the B or the K, is incorporated into that shape. But ultimately, I think there's a sonic connection there as far as the sound is concerned. And so this, again, is an example of how an abstract shape can have a connected subconscious character consequence. Lots of C words. There's another example. This is Pixar. I'm going to play it, but I'm also going to talk over it. And Pixar has a distinct advantage as a film company and production company to literally to use these subtle differences in shape to their extreme advantage, because they have control over every detail in the frame. And so if you watch as Anton Ego in this scene is eating the ratatouille, his nose is very sharp, his chin is very sharp, his lips are sort of pointed out at the edge. But then as he eats it and is reminded of his childhood, his entire young face is softer and saggier and warmer and rounder. And the colors are bright and yellow, and his eyes, again, are a lot rounder than they might have been. And we see this return and the comparison, and of course he drops the pen. So again, we have a softer, warmer shape. This is the character of shape, that something can be angular and defined, or round and comforting and inviting and welcoming. And so ultimately these details add up in the end. No. Okay, there's a third aspect. This third aspect of aesthetics is the aspect of value. This has a lot to do with the materials that are selected in a piece. So, the first thing we're going to look at is this food, juicer. It's a juicer. Early 1980s, I believe. The idea is that if an object appears, or if anything appears to have been well put together, to have been very carefully designed, or looks beautiful, you will often perceive that object to do its job very well, even if it maybe doesn't. This idea is called aesthetic perception. The thinking is that if you build objects that look really well put together, then you might expect them to do a really good job, whether or not they do. So if a hospital, for example, is very carefully arranged, very detailed, very well thought out aesthetically, you're more likely to trust that hospital with your life. The guy who observed this juicer, and talked about aesthetic perception, is the same guy who later went on to make these products. Johnny Ive, a lead designer at Apple. And these are products that have an inherent value because of the materials that are chosen, because of the way that they are meticulously designed. So this is an example of material, its effect on our perception of the value and overall trustworthiness of an object. So again, to revisit Butaro, the hospital was designed with those things in mind. We have the color yellow, we have open air windows, we have open hallways and walkways. And while it's true that hospitals are not, it's very difficult to make a hospital a happy place because you're there because you're sick or dying, it's also valuable to consider that a hospital can just as easily be a place of healing as it is a place of sickness. And what Michael Murphy observed that I think is important is that the details in the aesthetics of something like a hospital, or even something like a letter or a presentation, ultimately have a larger effect on your perception of that thing. And understanding that and being able to harness that, I think, is valuable. Thank you.